clients all over the country, but primarily in Virginia. I support the 29 centers throughout the Virginia network, and so I spend my days in front of worksheets, and so I do a lot of writing on board. So that's what I'm going to do for you today. And so we'll start with where my journey really began, which is a college psychology course. And I was really fascinated by self-help books and personal development from a very early age. And so I just read a lot, and that's just my nature. I think Frank and I share that in that regard. And so I really consumed a lot of books. And then I got to this college psychology course, and I recognized that what I had been reading was not through the lens of science. And so I started to deeply dive into what it really meant to have productivity principles, and those actually be founded on scientific research and those meta-analyses of the work that was going on. And I found a passion. And I have completely gone away from that in terms of my career, legal, and then went on to now in the small business consulting space. But it's remarkable how much productivity and productivity technology comes back into my world. And so over the course of this time, I think at last count I've read about 447 books in the personal development space, and I tried to figure out over the course of this past 25 or so years is what is the thread that kind of the narrative that brings all of those pieces together. And what I came up with is what I'm going to share with you in the next 15 minutes. So I'm going to set my little timer here, and we're going to go for 15, and then I'm going to give 5 minutes Q&A. And so here we go. This is Getting More Done. Getting More Done is founded on a fundamental shift in how we actually think about personal productivity. So who here can define personal productivity? It's a trick question. How do you define personal productivity? I'll tell you up front it's a trick question. Someone, anyone, go for it. What's your name?
Okay, my name is Al.
Al.
Personal productivity is getting something done which actually has an impactable real-world value, well, that actually you can give and deliver to others, or just something personal like working out. Well, that doesn't really give anybody else anything. Go.
Great. Who else? Anyone else want to define personal productivity? Individual productivity.
Getting important things done.
Getting important things done. Now, what I will tell you is that if I went around and asked each one of you to define personal productivity, it means something different to all of you. Okay? That's why it's personal productivity. It's not raised productivity. So remember that any productivity system that you develop in your world, the skills, strategies, tools, all of those things are in the ever-flowing river of your life. They change as needs change. And so don't think about this as a static system, but a framework for you to be able to change as life circumstances change. You're buying a house, you have a child, you get married, you get divorced, you downsize, you lose a couple legal cases. Whatever it is that happens in life, you change based on the needs of the situation. And that was a fundamental shift that I had, because I thought that I would set up the perfect system and I would have it, and that would be it. And it's absolutely false. The people who are most successful know how to dynamically bend, and know how to be flexible among the mess and messiness of life. Productivity is messy. Your job is to stay as organized as you need to among all of the dynamism and flexibility and tragedy and joy that happens in life. And so what I tried to do is to try and figure out what were the pillars of how these pieces come together. And the first one was kind of taking away the mythos of what we traditionally heard in productivity. So on one half of the world, you have Tony Robbins, and no offense against, I know you're all big Tony Robbins fans, but Tony Robbins has one way of categorizing the world, right? We have categories of improvement. He has different areas of life. Dr. Stephen Covey has this notion of the idea of the 4 quadrants, having the mind, the body, the spirit, and what's the other one? Emotion, and bringing those pieces as fundamental parts of our world. And they think about this from a top-down approach. Right? So we think about the world from a top-down approach. We want to make big goals and big procedures and make those big things happen. And then we have the fundamental flip side to that, which is the David Allen of the world, a person who I've known for many years and respect highly. And what he talks about is the notion of actually starting from the ground up, finding the small incremental thing, the action at the bottom of the hierarchy, and doing that action, because each of the action steps up should be at the top. To getting those outcomes, those goals accomplished. What I realized is that most people actually weren't working from, they were working from those extremes. There's actually a center place. And so working from the center really means something very different to everybody. And this comes back to Tony Robbins, right? So you have categories of improvement. You have, in David Allen, we have areas of focus and accountability. In Dr. Stephen Covey, again, we have those 4 quadrants. And what we can do now is we can think about your world from the roles and responsibilities and the life categories, as I call them, in your world. Now, when you think about them from the roles, you actually start to blend together various goals and actions into a cohesive narrative, right? So like, I'm a partner, in a business, I have a significant other, I have a family, my baby sister just became a medical examiner for the city of Philadelphia. Extremely proud of her, right? She plays with dead bodies all day. And she's worked really hard, went to medical school, all of this stuff to get to where she is today. And I want to be the best brother to her as possible. I have 4 other siblings, but the point is that that's a thing that I can now blend together. And when I'm working from the center, I have a stronger narrative. And if we have stronger narratives around what we want to accomplish, we're going to get there faster. We're going to get there better. We're going to have better standards. We're going to have better results. Okay, so stop thinking about just the individual pieces of projects and actions and goals. Bring them together into that. What is the role? What's the context of why I'm doing that? And it tends to help you move forward. I don't have a lot of time to cover this, so just bear with me. But first is working from the center. The next up is something that I talk about a lot, which is taking attention and moving that to intention. And it really comes down to focus. So once we define what our life categories are, what our roles are in the world, we frequently don't understand how to get moving forward in getting more done. And understand that getting more done, different than say getting things done, the methodology by David Allen, or what's the rapid planning model? These things are all different productivity methodologies. Well, focus in getting more done is actually about getting better at getting better. You can get more done by getting better at getting better, and learning how to get better is actually something that you aren't taught in school. No one really teaches you how to get better at getting better, and that's what I really wanted to focus on. So if we identify our roles in life, if we identify our life categories, and we have a better narrative about what we want to accomplish by setting standards around who we are, as opposed to what we want to do, we then get more clarity and focus. When we get to focus, there's something I call skills mastery. Skills mastery is becoming damn good at one thing. So attention becomes intention by just deciding on becoming good at one thing. And it's terribly difficult for all of you out there to do one thing. And I'm telling you, none of this is easy. I'm going to be straight with you. Most people have a very difficult time wrapping their head around the idea that they just can't buy a planner, put in 1, 2, 3 steps, and then achieve life success. This is difficult work, but once you do it, your life gets better. And you get better at getting better. And once you identify skills mastery in one area of life, you learn how to become actually really good in other areas of your life. It's this compound effect, compound interest, right? You learn how to get really good at one thing. I always use the example, I write a lot of reports in my world. So since I work for a pseudo-governmental organization, you can imagine that I have to write these tomes of documents. Well, I use that as a skills mastery exercise. I spent the better part of 6 months just learning how to craft a report as efficient and effective as possible so that my implementation intention was to step into the office no matter what time, 8 a.m., 5 p.m., it didn't matter what time of day it was. That first thing I did was I sat down and I did those reports. And I'm telling you, like, all of the ways in which I could think about doing the reports were thought about. And then I implemented the best parts of it. And today, I love writing my reports. Going from a place where I hated writing those things to a place where I actually love them because I do them well, I get wrapped in the ability to help my clients. I get to help all kinds of clients. I mean, I see manufacturing clients on the panhandle of West Virginia to people who are building products and pastry chefs and lawyers and doctors, the whole 9 yards. And I get to see all of them prosper based on me typing up some words on a piece of paper, right, or in a digital piece of paper. So once you learn skills mastery, you really get this idea that, okay, well, if I can learn how to get better at getting better at one thing, I can do that in all kinds of areas. But we also see that it bleeds out. So you get better at your relationship with your kids in your process of getting ready in the morning. Guess what? That means your relationship probably with your spouse, with yourself, with your job, all of those things start to actually collect these ancillary benefits from just learning skills mastery. Focus on one thing. We then get to the next step. So when we think about the flow here, I'm giving this to you in kind of the big chunks. I tend to take people in this order. You can actually go out of the order for the sake of it. So the next thing we need to really understand then from focus is then figuring out where we are in the course of our kind of timeline of life. And so I'm just going to write these out for myself so that I can take us backwards and I can stop writing on the screen. So take action, and then we go to organization, and then routine. Oops. Sorry, I know that I'll be writing, I'm going to stay here forever and we don't have that much time. Okay, so next up is where are you in your life? And understanding where you are in your life is actually really important. So our routines are these things that actually coordinate our lives. So if we understand where we are in terms of the things we want to accomplish in life, we then learn skills mastery, and traditionally we then move to routines. A lot of people talk about habit development, and in reality, habit development is the wrong thing to focus on. We should really focus on the backbones of our life. Every day you get up and you do the same things over and over and over again. And if we can modify just ever so slightly how you do those things, we can then create compound benefits by doing those things really well, or removing those things completely that don't support you. That depends on where you are in life. So if you're a parent with children, or if you are a single city professional, urban professional, versus being a retiree or nearing retirement, those are all very different things that you do. And you've learned routines throughout your life that either support or hold you back, and you need to learn how to control those pieces. So that ends up being the next real phase in getting more done. We then get to motivation. And so motivation is really all about accountability, just to like shortcut us. So motivation is really all about accountability. We tend to think about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation as well as internal and external rewards. There's lots of research out there about that. Well, what it comes down to is that motivation mostly comes around us being social creatures. Humans are social beings. And one of the most powerful forms of motivation is accountability. You can just ask Joseph, right? And so what we do is, if we can find the right amounts of accountability, we can tend to overcome some of the things that we struggle with when it comes to routine. So that comes to focus as well. Accountability can help in each of these areas in terms of being able to set up enough accountability. There are 4 levels of accountability that most people don't recognize, but they are just in existence. We start with self-accountability. Gretchen Rubin would call this the upholder personality, the upholder type, and it's just the notion that if I want to do something, I will make it happen. I don't need someone else to make myself accountable. I can keep myself accountable to that thing. That's why it's called self-accountability. Well, we take it up a level, and that becomes one-to-one accountability, right? So if I want to do something or need to do something and I'm not doing it, then I find someone else, either a casual relationship like a friend or a family member or a colleague, or stepping it up to professional level where you might hire a coach or someone who would help you keep you accountable to making that thing happen. We then take it up another level and notice that as we increase accountability, we're increasing the number of people, and therefore in essence the risk associated with failure, which tends to motivate us. The challenge associated with doing those things actually increases. Challenge is a motivator. Let me just repeat this because it's so important. So many people think that reducing friction is what creates ease of making things happen. That is the absolute inverse of things. People are motivated by challenge. We did not go from being zygotes or whatever, eukaryotes or whatever they were on the face of this planet, to being the human beings that we are today by not dealing with challenge. We are wired for challenge. When something is more challenging, we tend to then step up to it. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we fall, but most of the time, if we actually take on the challenge, we are better. When something is mundane, we ignore it, right? Doing laundry is mundane, so we don't do it. Well, put a timer on. Make yourself, get something that's gamification, do something that's fun and interesting that makes it more challenging, and I bet you'll want to do it more, okay? So challenge is a motivator. Anyway, so self-accountability, one-to-one accountability, we then step up to group accountability. We then find a group of people. That's why we have group exercise classes, that's why we have all kinds of group accountability programs across the world and peer accountability programs. And then we have a final step, which is what we call public accountability. This is the notion of going out there and saying to the world, I'm going to run a marathon and raise $10,000 for X charity or cause, right?
The Basket Brigade.
There we go, right. But not quite the same thing. But either way, but it's an individual's purposeful statement to get something done. Use those wisely, okay? They're typically high risk and low reward activities. So for example, I'm training for the Pittsburgh Half Marathon, and I have knee problems. I'm a long-time marathoner, and running a half marathon is a challenge for me. And so if I were to publicly state to people that I'm going to run a marathon, I'm going to run the marathon whether I tell all of you or not, right? High risk, because there is a chance that, heck, I sprain my ankle. And very low reward on the opposite side of it, because I'm going to run it whether or not I tell you. So why don't I use those things for the really important stuff, as opposed to these really low reward items? And I see people doing public accountability for things that are really not as useful. Like if you're not really into writing that book, don't tell everybody you're going to do it. If you're going to really do something, make the challenge public, but don't do it if you really don't plan on actually making it happen. Okay, so that's motivation. Lots of stuff there. Okay, finally is taking action. Now I talked about all those productivity methodologies. All of those fit here. They're basically organization systems. And in essence, getting more done, we take the idea of organization, sorry, I kind of screwed that up, but we take organization and taking action as the last thing. Because in reality, getting more done is not about the individual projects that you do every day, right? Those are one-time, very granular things that are moving discrete projects along. Those are very different than all of the rest of your life that you spend in routine, okay? So if we can deal with learning skills that we can master, and if we can get our routine underway, then we actually get more done. And it's remarkable how many people think that buying a paper planner, buying a new fancy piece of software, getting their GTD system up and running is really truly going to help them be more productive, and they end up spinning their wheels for 6 months, 18 months, 24 months, sometimes more than that. And they keep coming back to me thinking, well, why am I not actually getting more done? And I say, well, what do you do every day? Where are you wasting your time every day? And then we start having a real conversation about how they can actually use their organization system to support all of this stuff. And so with that, that's getting more done. It's the whole notion of being able to learn how to identify your life story, the narratives around your life, making sure that you can focus and learn how to master a single skill, because focus is so important. We turn attention to intention. We then turn that attention to the intention of our routines. We learn how to motivate ourselves effectively to make those routines come to pass. And then we learn how to organize both the things in our life, right? We have to capture things, we have to trigger ourselves to make those things happen, we have to be able to reference things and incubate things as we need to, and that's all where taking action takes place. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions in the 4 minutes and 30 seconds that I have left about getting more done. Just say this for me,
Try
Rob.
and drop. Yeah.
Yes.
What is the most common part of people's routine that you find them falling down on?
Yeah, so always morning routine. It's like hands down morning routine, and then it's their nightly routine. So we have a sleep epidemic in this country, and part of these two pieces is talking about the notion of the 7 kind of fundamentals of life, right? So we have nutrition, physical fitness, mental, emotional fitness. We have rejuvenation. We have all those things, right? And so when we deal with those pieces, sleep being one of them, sleep always is in there as being one of the #1 problems, and that's usually a morning routine problem. If it's not a morning routine problem, it's an evening routine problem. But if you're not getting enough sleep, you're depriving your waking life of so much that it's just, why are you doing anything waking? You should just go back to sleep because you're useless. So that's the #1 problem that I see. Like really, people just like walk around like zombies all day. It's really remarkable. And I'm not, I'm casting aspersions on hot, calling kettle black, right? We're all in that space, right? We have basically mini computers that are shining bright lights in our face all day. It's a very strong problem that I don't think any one individual or any one society can fix. This needs to be a global approach that we all learn how to steward technology in our lives and in the lives of our children as we get to know them and know the problems. But yeah, to your point, it is absolutely a morning routine issue. If you can learn how to start your day well, you will then, you basically set yourself up for a better day. Read something like Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, those kinds of books that help you really archetype a really great routine for the morning, and that'll just set the world in motion better for you.
We can do one more question, and then you can approach Ray after at the party.
So yeah, I saw your name.
I was just curious, because you were saying how the focus on routine as opposed to breaking habits, and I was just wondering if you could speak more to that distinction.
Sure, yeah. So habits are habitual behaviors, things that we call automaticity in psychological lingo. And so what we frequently hear is people talking about habit development. We have tiny habits and mini habits and all kinds of habit-related courses. Those are not to say they're not good. I mean, there's reasons for us wanting to develop new good habits and breaking old bad habits, which is really just creating new better habits on top of the habits that already exist that are bad for us, right? So those are really the same things in my mind. Habit development is great, but habit development is freaking hard, right? Has anybody ever tried to break a habit, right? Yeah. It's just difficult. Starting a new habit is difficult. Routines are easy. Routines already exist. So modifying a routine is actually changing habitual behavior, but part of a string of habits. So routines are strings of habits, so we can actually work with the routine that exists and make minor modifications to the routine using positive reward and positive reinforcement. I'm a positive behaviorist, so my psychological training is all around the idea of working people toward and through positive behavioral support. And so I don't believe in negative rewards, or punishment as we call them, and negative reinforcement. I think they are dangerous to the human mind, just generally. There's a lot of good science around that. Psychological safety, if you want to Google psychological safety, there's a lot of really good infant research on how we develop psychological safety and how it actually impacts us through our entire lifespan. So habits are great, but they actually impede upon our psychological safety. People like James Clear, who I highly recognize as being great and wonderful, he writes about this notion of taking on a role, which is very similar to what I'm talking about here, but he's actually doing that on the habit development level, which is actually very dangerous because it goes ahead and puts us into this psychologically unsafe space where we're putting in counter to what we're doing. We're not being what we want to be, we're saying what we want to be, and then we're doing the opposite. So we look back at our past selves, and we get to name, blame, and shame ourselves, when in reality, we should just look at what we're doing and just make minor modifications to it. So it's just a little bit different approach, but again, it's just from the research, the way in which I see it has been, habits are great. If you can develop habits, and you're one of those people, good on you. But for the rest of us, look to your routines. You're going to be able to attach just small behavioral modifications, and that's going to be easier just generally.
So thank you, Ray, Sidney Smith, for a rocking, awesome presentation.
Thank you.
Got a nice warm hand for Ray. 1, 2, 3, you rock!
So Ray has an event called GTD NYC every couple months in New York City, and so Ray has a meetup, GTD NYC, so there's no charge at all. It's amazing. Once a month, round table. It's like the biggest secret in New York. Go to it and learn, because you'll save thousands of hours. His book is called Getting More Done. Is it gettingmoredone.com? Is that the site?
Getting More Done book, but it's not out yet, so you can't buy it yet. It'll be out later this year, but you folks can find me at my website.
RaySidneySmith.com. Just Google search
R.
your
Sidney.
name. RSidneySmith.com. Thank you so much for a great presentation. And we'll find ways to add more links to his prog pod and other things onto our Facebook page.
And I did a full hour-long presentation on this. I'll share a link and
Please.
you guys can get
Awesome.
a better sense
Awesome.
of what I'm talking about because I had to rush through pieces.
You did a great job in the 20 minutes. Thank you so much. So what Ray did was kind of a game. In 20 minutes, he had the opportunity of sharing as much as he could to relay the information. Everyone agreed that they got a sense of getting more done. Fantastic. So we're about to play a game here now, because in about 5 minutes, if we're not out of here, we get charged quite a bit more to.
It's a negative reward.
Exactly. So we're going to ask you to quietly to go to the back, bring your chair to the back.
And we need 2 volunteers in the back room to help stack the chairs.
Yep.
So during this, we can probably do this in about 60 to 120 seconds. Nobody talks, all right? So no talking. 2 volunteers in the back. Everybody stand up, put your stuff on the floor, pick up your chair, fold it up, walk into the back in assembly line style. Let's get all these chairs put away in the next 60 seconds. And then once all the chairs are away, we'll do the next step.